I keep it thorough. I got 5 chicks in New York, that means 1 in each borough. I'm in the pocket like Burrow. When I'm back home, they treat me like Robert De
Happy
Niro.
Friday, everybody. We made it. It's Moose and Keith, Justin Fensterman in Fensty. We call him here on the Better Sports Network, or he's called all over the place. Does your wife call you Fensty?
No, I told her one time, Moose, and it's great to be with you again. I told her one time, I said, you can call me Fensty if you want to. And she goes, I'm never, ever going to call you. I was serious too. I'm like, you can call me Fensty. No, like only like my mom calls me Justin.
Yeah.
I'm like, you, and she's like, I will never, ever call you that.
Yeah, I my wife's never called me Moose. It would be good morning, brother. It's good to have you with us here for the next couple hours. We got a lot of things to get into, and you posed a great question because I tweeted out some photos last night. I took Donna and I took our 3 boys to the Rangers Devils game at the Prudential Center at the Rock, and Ranger fans in the house. And first and foremost, let me thank the Devils because I bought the tickets through them, and they were great. And we had a great time. We had a fun evening. It was a long drive down to Newark, New Jersey, fighting all the rush hour traffic at that time, but saw a great Ranger performance. And I was telling the boys, it was like, I've been to a number of playoff games, Justin. I'm sure you have as well over, the course of your life. We're huge, huge sports fans, whatever it might be. It was the first road Ranger playoff game that I've ever been to. I've been to a number of games at Madison Square Garden, never been to a road Ranger playoff game. And they gave a great performance, fell behind 1-0, eventually win the game 5-1. Kreider with a couple goals, and Kane with a goal and a couple of assists. He played really, really well. They had an amazing time. They had really an amazing time, and they had a fun night and hopefully making memories. That's really what it's all about. But you posed a great question, like on social right before the start of our show about an hour ago. Greatest kind of game that you've ever been to, playoff game that you've ever been to, Justin, what would that be?
Man, and I'm thinking about it, Moose, because even back in your producing days, back in the 2000s and the late 90s, you were also covering these games as well for WFAN. So I'm sure your list is a laundry list. For me, though, it comes down to 2 games, and I actually have both ticket stubs right here.
Oh, look at that.
That's right. So ticket stubs, a thing of the past, Moose, because
I miss ticket stubs.
Dude, I don't know why they got rid of them. It's one of the best souvenirs that you can have. I've collected all mine throughout my life, and I go through them every so often because it brings back those memories from the specific games. But the 2 that I've been to here, which represents these ticket stubs, 2 different Mets World Series Game 3s. I went to the one in 2000 versus the Yankees that they won. Then I went to the one in 2015 that they also won, and that happened to be both games, the only 2 games they won of either series.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that's great. That's great. And yeah, I mean, I have I think the greatest playoff game I was ever at was the 94 Stanley Cup Final Game 7 Rangers Canucks.
Oh, wow.
I was there with my dad. We had my dad he was working for City at the time. We had he split with 6 other guys at his company that split like season tickets to where you got like, I don't know what it was, like 7 games during the regular season, 6 games during the regular season. And then you've got a shot to go to like postseason games. And it kind of ran through the list. So we were up for the Stanley Cup final. We could either pick game 1 or game 7. That was our options, either the first game of the series or game 7 of the series. And I had a dream, and I was 18. I had just turned 18. So I was 18 at the time. This was 94. Justin, you'll never believe it, but I had a dream that my dad and I were at the Stanley Cup final. The Rangers won the cup, and it was game 7.
Wow.
And so my dad was like,
how did you pick that? That's a big risk right there.
That is a huge gamble. So either you have the certainty of
distance.
Right. So you have the certainty of game 1, and it's game 1 of the series, and you have everything where the Rangers are in the Stanley Cup final, and it's Madison Square Garden. And I had a dream about game 7 that we were there and they won the Stanley Cup. And my dad was like, how do I deny my son's dream? Like, let's go for game 7. And if you remember in that series, they had a chance to win it in 5. They had a chance to win it in 6. The Canucks came back from 3-1 down to force a game 7. And my dad and I were as was my uncle and my cousin, we were all at game 7 in 94 in the Stanley Cup final. That's even with all the great experiences I had with Mike and Chris, and we were at big Yankee games, big Met games, and Mets Cardinals, NLCS, and big football games. That was probably my greatest game that I've ever been at. 94 Stanley Cup final when the Rangers won the Cup.
Was it different for you, the feeling when you were covering? Because I mean, being a former producer, I covered games as well. Was it different covering the game, or were you, when you're at work, versus just being a fan? Or
well, yeah, you
still enjoy the work? Because Moose, I mean, you were always into your work. Same here. I mean, I'm focused on the broadcast being the best that it could possibly be, whether it was the post-game show or anything like that. But I always wondered if it's different, or you still get that same kind of oomph when you're a fan of the team, but are actually covering it for work.
Yeah, well, it you know, Justin, it's completely, to me, it's completely different when you're at something for as a fan as compared to when you're there for work. I mean,
Right.
because you're focused, like you were mentioning, you're focused there on your job and producing and putting together a great show or a post game show, whatever it might be. And even like when we were doing like Mike and Chris, when I was producing Mike and Chris, we were at a big event and the show was done and you're hanging out afterward because say you're in another city or say we're in Boston for Yankees, Red Sox, and you know you're going to be there the next day, you stay and you're watching the game. You can't root. Like there's no rooting. Like you're sitting there, you're with Yankee people, Red Sox, everyone's covering the game. There's signs all over the place. There's no rooting in the press box. You can't pump your fist. You can't high five anybody. You can't do anything. So you have to basically sit there like a cyborg and watch the game. You can't do anything. So it's completely different now as compared to last night. Like I wasn't over the top and we were with the boys and I was busy getting popcorn and pretzels.
I was going to ask you what it's like to go to a game with multiple kids. Are you just at the snack line the entire time?
Well, there was one time where we went out after the first period, Fensty, and they wanted one wanted popcorn, the other wanted chips, and I get waters, right? So went there. The line was like 25 deep. I'm like, I'll go when the second period gets going. Like I'll go at the first break of the second period. I'll go back. There'll be nobody on the line, and I'll be back here in like 3 minutes, rather than waiting 25 minutes on a line at that stage, because everybody, the same line that you could buy water and popcorn and the chips was the same line you could buy beer. So the line was amazingly long. So I wasn't going to do that. It was fun. Like being able, here's the thing, Fensty, is like be able to live a game through your kids' eyes and see their excitement. Like it makes you excited as a parent.
I can't wait, man. And, I have yet to take my daughter, who's going to be 2 in July, to a sporting event. And
you're going to love it.
That time is coming, man. I mean, we already watch a bunch of games on TV when I root for the Jets. When the Jets lost to the Patriots on that punt return last season, and we were watching it together, I literally look at her and I go, Here you go, kid. Here's looking at you, kid. This is the beginning of a long, long life of disappointments from the bad New York teams that you have just been essentially grandfathered into. So I can only imagine what it's going to be like being at the game. By the way, the other games that I was at, and I'm seeing comments as well, and let us know in the comments section what the greatest playoff game in any sport that you've been to. Let us know, and let us know a memory as well. This is what's great about Moose being at the game last night. Now we can all relate to that. I mean, Moose, I was at the Islanders Maple Leafs game, I think back in 02 or 03 when Sean Bates hit that penalty shot.
Yes.
3 or 4, Nassau Coliseum. The roof just blew off.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yep.
And that place was a dump at the end.
Yeah, but it was our dump there.
I understand. Yes, I agree. And it was a tremendous home atmosphere. There's no doubt about it. But that is an amazing game. Like that's why you love sports, is you love it for this time of the regular season. You can have great regular season moments, Fensty, but playoff time is just strikes different, whether it be the Stanley Cup playoffs, whether it be the NBA playoffs, MLB playoffs. The anticipation, like you had, like yesterday, I woke up, I knew we were going to be going to the game. We surprised the kids in the morning, left the jerseys out when they woke up and told them, and they were all fired up. And I had like butterflies throughout the course of the day, being like, I can't wait to get there and kind of take in the atmosphere. And it was so much fun.
I mean, just passing it down to the next generation here. I mean, we've made careers out of this, and sports are life to us. And again, I think about back when I was 13 in 2000, when the Knicks were playing the Heat in Game 3. I brought this up last week. That was the game where Anthony Carter hit that circus shot, which looked like it went over the opposite side of the backboard and in overtime. But in that game, what I remember specifically, Patrick Ewing's final clutch moment as a New York Knick with 2 seconds to go. And I'll never forget the site had a perfect view of it. I was sitting up in section 343 or 347. So I had a great view of it still, even though I'm like, squinting. And Patrick Ewing with 2 seconds to go gets the ball. And I remember sitting there being like, not Patrick, not Patrick. And he nails that shot from the free throw line with 2 seconds to go. And everybody just gets up and cheers. And then you have all the guys racing to the bathroom to go hit the bathroom before overtime. And it was just crazy. And I'll never forget that, because then in the offseason, Patrick Ewing was traded to the Sonics.
Yeah, I know he was traded, and that was the end of the Patrick Ewing era. That's just amazing. Want to hear from you. Fire up in the chat session. Give us a call. Matt Deutsch, Better Boss, chiming in. Best game he's ever at was first game after 9/11, Mets Braves. That was the Piazza home run. That was on so many different levels. That was just an amazing evening in Queens.
Emotional night. That was where everybody had the police and fire department hats on and everything like that. So
yeah, it's one of the biggest home runs in the history of New York sports. I mean, biggest moments, I would say, in the history of New York sports. There's no question about it. And that was
how about this one, Moose? I got one on Twitter. I mean, we've been talking a lot of New York sports, but going beyond that, and see David on Twitter here at King David 318. See, this is what happens when you respond to the question. We make you famous there. You get a little shout out. He was at the Detroit Pistons New Jersey Nets game when Chauncey Billups hit that shot from half court to force overtime. I remember just the ball banking in from half court, and that's where he got the name Mr. Big Shot, Chauncey Billups, for that 04 Pistons team. And I remember I was at an after party of a junior prom. No one else is paying attention to the game. Everybody's like, having fun partying. I'm dead set on that game because I wanted to see if the Pistons and that amazing defense that they played in 04 and route to a championship, I wanted to see if they could take out the Nets, who were in the finals the previous 2 years. And I remember Chauncey Billups hitting that shot. I can only imagine what it's like being live at that game when it happened.
Unbelievable. Ernie Acosta, our producer, Jeter final game at Yankee Stadium is his. And
Jeter walked off, right? Jeter walked off with a base hit, I believe, in that game.
That was it. Yeah. That's a great moment. I mean, to be at Jeter's final game at Yankee Stadium is a pretty cool moment as well. But we'll continue the conversation, continue to talk about great moments, great sporting events that you were at, great playoff games, regular season, doesn't matter. It's a really cool topic, and it's really what makes us sports fans. It really is. I mean, there's no question about it. What's your big takeaway from what we saw last night? We'll get into the NHL and talk a little Rangers Devils a little bit later on the show, but Fancy, what's your big takeaway from what we saw last night in the NBA? The amazing Philadelphia 76ers cover was a big topic of conversation on social as they covered the 4.5, not only have a 3 games to no commanding lead of the Brooklyn Nets in their series, but the fact that Brooklyn went the final 2 minutes and 45 seconds without scoring. It's like, they didn't need to do much to cover the 4.5. Not only does Philly win the game, but they also cover the 4.5.
Moose, you want my reaction on this game? You could take the next 12 minutes off and take a little nap or something like that, because I can go off. There's a lot of frustration with this game, and it ties into, and I know that you covered it with Corey Parson a couple of days ago. I know you covered it with Keith as well when he was on, but a lot of this ties into the Draymond Green BS suspension. Seeing what we saw last night, 3 minutes into the game, Nick Claxton walks over Joel Embiid. Joel Embiid's on the floor, and Joel Embiid makes like it's a WWE no disqualification match and literally kicks him right in the private area and does not get thrown out of the game. This wasn't what I thought was incidental, because I do think the laws of physics really come to play here with Draymond Green. I saw the video 1,000 times. Sabonis was holding his leg. Draymond Green maybe shouldn't react so much with flaring up the arms and draw more attention of the naked eye of the official. But what Joel Embiid did was fully intentional. And I know that he got a flagrant for it and everything. The fact that he wasn't kicked out of the James Harden in the third of the game for a crotch grab on Royce O'Neal that was questionable in general. I don't get the inconsistency of these referees, man. It's too much with these refs already. And Nick Claxton getting thrown out for flexing, man. I mean, Moose, we grew up with that not even being a call. I mean, even in the 80s, too, you had Robert Parrish literally knocking out Bill Laimbeer, foul not even called. And I know things have changed. They don't want fighting or anything like that. But to see both Nick Claxton getting kicked out for flexing and James Harden get booted from the third quarter for that questionable crotch grab, and then nothing happening to Embiid. Too much inconsistency, man. I don't know if you thought the same.
Yeah, I mean, my question would be this, is that, you look at Embiid, and I guess it's going to be the reaction that Nick Claxton was walking over him, right? Kind of doing that, flex or whatever. I would say this, it started though with Embiid, because as Nick Claxton is going up, Embiid is grabbing his lower body and then goes to the ground. And then Nick Claxton realizes that and starts to step over him. And then Embiid goes to kick him in the you-know-whats, in the privates. And yeah, where is the inconsistency now? Is the NBA going to do something against Joel Embiid? I mean, that's the question, because
he should be suspended for game 4. You're going to suspend Draymond Green for his.
Well, where's the history though? But here's the problem is the NBA backed themselves in a corner, because, and I was one that looked at the Draymond Green thing, and I'll be honest with you, Fancy, we didn't chat about it at the time. But I was one where I didn't necessarily think Draymond Green deserved to get suspended for what he did, because I thought I thought Sabonis was one that started it by holding on to his ankle. And then Draymond Green, I think the commissioner being in attendance, obviously his history, because Joe Dumars pointed that out, not only during the statement that was released by the NBA, but then in a subsequent interview that he did with ESPN, that the history of Draymond Green, him playing to the crowd, was conduct detrimental, which led to the game suspension last night. Didn't factor in Golden State wins that game by daylight, but still, Draymond suspended for game 3. Yeah, if you're going to be consistent, you're going to say, well, you can't have something what Joel Embiid did last night in Brooklyn, when that game is early. What was it, a 6-4 game, I think it was, at that point in time, when Joel Embiid does it?
Game.
I mean, you take Joel Embiid out of that game, you're looking now at a 2-1 series. Yeah, now the problem you have, though, Fancy, is Embiid does not have a history of doing this.
Or does he, Moose? Because respectfully, I like to say that this guy, over the last number of years, he's a trash talker. Kind of like what Dylan Brooks has done all year here, being the new bad boy, quintessential bad boy here of the league. Joel Embiid is a big-time trash talker, and while maybe he doesn't have the exact moments that Draymond Green has had in the postseason, this guy incites a lot of anger from the opposition, and you've seen it clearly over the last number of years. He's a trash talker.
He is a trash talker. If you missed it, here, let's roll the video, because we've got it. Here's what Fency and I have been discussing here, and why Joel Embiid deserved to get tossed early in that game last night in Brooklyn. Take a look.
Hard to tell there. There's the finish, and there's the stare down and the step over. Ooh. Look like
this.
Yes.
Seriously, what is this?
Well, right. And I would say Embiid was wrong on 2 factors. If you roll it back there, when Claxton is going up, Embiid starts to push at his lower legs, which would lead to a guy being unbalanced. Roll it again one more time, Ernie, because if you look in that, and I think that's what led to the step over by Nick Claxton. Take a look.
hard to tell there. There's the finish, and there's the stare down and the step over. Ooh. Look like
you see it clear as day, the right elbow to the lower extremity, the legs of Nick Claxton as he's going up. And you don't want to do that because that's having lack of respect for your opponent. And then you get Embiid, then not liking the fact that Nick Claxton is stepping over him. Then Embiid's going to be the regular season MVP in the NBA. And then he gives you the subsequent kick to the privates of Nick Claxton. Yeah, I don't, here's what I don't understand. How does he play the rest of the game? Like you mentioned, Fancy, how is he not thrown out of the game for kicking an opponent as he did last night? You're right. He has a history of trash talking. He doesn't have a history like Draymond Green did of doing those kind of dirty antics. But last night was a case in point. That's something that Joe Dumars and the NBA have got to look at and say, well, should he not be? And it's an easy one for them because Brooklyn's not going to come back and win this series. They're down 3-0. He should have been ejected last night. So if you suspend him for game 4 and then he's available for game 5, that's an easy fix for the NBA. It's probably the one that they're probably going to do.
You know, it's very interesting, I'm sure, in a way, because we have not seen an NBA team come back down 0-3 ever in the history of the game in a 7-game series. So I was actually thinking about this. I was on another show last night, and I was actually like debating this with the co-host. If the Sixers were to go up 3-0, because Embiid also took a lot of shots here. The Nets did not forget about it. They were knocking him around all over the place. He took a lot of hard falls. He was stretching out his back at one point. It made me wonder, because of the past history with Embiid getting hurt in the playoffs, ruining the Sixers' playoff runs in a couple of years, if they were to go up 3-0, if they would just keep Embiid out for precautionary reasons for game 4, or you just don't mess with that because you never know. And now it's almost like if Embiid gets suspended, I'm sure the Sixers would almost welcome that. But then what about James Harden? James Harden gets kicked out of the game for a questionable crotch grab, and you're suspending Draymond Green. James Harden, also a trash talker as well. That's where it comes in for me, Moose. If these guys are taunting, and we know that both of them have had a history of taunting, I'm expecting the league to also possibly suspend James Harden too. You kicked him out of the game, so why isn't he viable for a suspension for game 4?
Yeah, who do you think is more likely to get suspended, though, Embiid or Harden?
Honestly, I think for the league, it's easier for them to suspend James Harden because he got kicked out of the game. So because now this Draymond Green issue is now going to be a dark cloud over the Philly situation. That's what everybody's going to be looking at right there. And you can't appeal it or anything like that. So I think because Draymond Green got ejected, James Harden got ejected, there's more of a direct correlation. I, however, think that with what Joel Embiid did, was the 1 seed of the worst cheap shot of any of the 3. And I think Joel Embiid should be suspended for game 4. And I just think because, Moose, like you said, Joel Embiid, face of the league, going to be named the MVP. I think that the league or the refs at the time felt too much pressure. And how dare they kick out Joel Embiid, the big kahuna, from this game. He should have been booted 3 minutes into this game. It was all intentional.
Well, but now you could correct it. And maybe the league looks at it and says, listen, we have to be somewhat consistent here, even though they were inconsistent during the game last night and getting beat out of the game. I don't understand how he's only assessed a flagrant. I don't understand how he stays in the game. Like, what was I was at Rangers Devils,
right?
Saw it afterward. But Justin, what was the rationalization why he was not ejected? Like, what were the analysts saying?
He's Joel Embiid. I mean, immediately the analysts didn't know what to do. The radio call that I was listening to the Sixers feed, they didn't know what to say because they want to definitely play to the home crowd and who they're listening to. So they don't want to all of a sudden turn on Joel Embiid, but there was no rationale. Immediately it was brought up, some of the other incidents that we've seen. And they, of course, bring up, well, Nick Claxton battling Joel Embiid. Nick Claxton plays with a lot of physicality, but Nick Claxton did a very good job defending Joel Embiid. The Nets had a chance in this game. They started off very nicely, and I happen to think that good defensive teams don't get swept. Maybe they lose in 5, maybe they lose in 6. I thought that this series could go as far as 6 games because of the Nets' great defense. And Nick Claxton was limiting Joel Embiid. He was being very physical with Joel Embiid. But this incident that took place was 3 minutes into the game. And then Nick Claxton getting ejected for taunting. I almost felt like the refs were trying to do makeup calls, especially after James Harden got ejected. They needed to do something, and Nick Claxton unfortunately fell in the line of fire. Moose, there was no rationale. He should have been kicked out of the game, and this is coming right off of the controversial Draymond Green suspension. But the Nets had multiple chances to win that game. But Tyrese Maxey, man, when you have 2 slow-paced defensive teams, like those old Spurs teams, the Patty Millses of the world come through big time in these series. Tyrese Maxey is that guy.
That's a good point. I like that. That's a good comparison.
Patty Mills. I mean, look, a change of pace player, come and take your slow-moving offense and speed it up. And despite having James Harden, Tyrese Maxey is the difference maker on this Sixers team. Unfortunately for the Suns, they continue to be without Cameron Payne. I think Cameron Payne, especially on a team that's very top heavy, is crucial for Phoenix to have and it's looking like they will advance for the later rounds. You need that change of pace player, especially if you're going to be moving on the slower side. And with two slow moving teams, Tyrese Maxey is that X factor, and we continue seeing him have a good playoff.
Right now, if I ask you, let's make a low prediction. You think Embiid's suspended by the NBA?
I don't think he is.
I don't think he is. I'll disagree. I think he does get suspended.
I hope he does. I think Harden is suspended for this game.
Okay, so we'll flip it because I don't think Harden does. I think Embiid gets suspended.
He should get suspended. Both of them should technically get suspended if you're going to do this to Draymond Green. And by the way, Moose, I know now my gears are grinding here because we've had a lot of incidents. Let's look ahead at the Lakers-Memphis series. You've got Dylan Brooks trash talk all year long, causing incidents, getting in people's faces, including Joel Embiid. You have him trash talking LeBron James. Let's say you have an incident where Dylan Brooks, James gets knocked to the ground on Saturday night, and all of a sudden Dylan Brooks steps over him and goes, What? You're no king. You're no GOAT. And he either gets kicked out or teed up. This guy has been openly critical and trash talking.
You know what? I gotta be honest with you, Fancy. Like I talked about yesterday. Like I don't know about you. I know you're not wrong. Where he set kind of and raised, I would say, threw gasoline onto the fire to Dylan Brooks with some of his words and rhetoric after the game and after the Game 2 Memphis win. I think it's good for the league. Like I think it's good to have. Like I used to watch wrestling a lot more than I do now, but. It's always good to have the heel. Like you need someone to play the bad guy. Multiple people to play the bad guy. And like we do have some, guys that play that role in the NBA. Dylan Brooks being another. Draymond Green being another.
Moose. I'm with you. I loved it. And trust me, Moose, being Knicks fans growing up, how much did we hate Reggie Miller? But you loved what Reggie Miller, the spice he brought to those series. Like he causing John Starks to headbutt him in 93 in the first round. The trash talking with Spike Lee in 94. It's great for the league, but Reggie never got called on any of that. That was the thing. Now you have refs calling these guys for taunting. Nick Claxton was kicked out for taunting. So if the refs are going to call that and that's going to change the complexion of the series, it's bad. And you got to call it across the board. So now I'm thinking about Dylan Brooks and Memphis here. And if Dylan Brooks pulls any crap in Game 3, I'm expecting the refs and the league to come down hard on him because he's been openly critical and he's been inciting the taunting.
All right, we'll preview some of the upcoming NBA games over the course of the weekend, including Knicks and Cavs tonight at Madison Square Garden. But, Fancy, let's continue reacting to what we saw last night. Outside of the Sixers leading that series against Brooklyn 102-97, now lead at 3-0. But the Warriors and Kings, the line yesterday, Keith and I talked about, Fancy. I didn't know how the line was begging you to take Sacramento. I mean, 6 points. I mean, they're just like, please, just bet the Sacramento Kings, please. Draymond Green's out there. We know you want to do it. We're going to put a line out there that's going to tell you, please, how could you not take Sacramento? They've been the better team. Even with the nonsense spewed by guys like JJ Redick saying the officiating is clearly favoring Sacramento. No, maybe just Sacramento was better in the first 2 games. They were begging you to take it. I didn't. I like the Kings in the series. I was a little sheepish because Golden State, as bad as they've been on the road, they've been great at home. And it's not like Sacramento's been this tour de force on the road either. They've been good. I mean, but Golden State's been historically, they have won 11 games on the road during the regular season. I thought it was kind of the circle the wagons kind of a game for the Golden State Warriors, and they gave you that kind of a performance. What did Curry finish with 36 on the night? I mean, they're knocking down their outside threes. What if Golden State is shooting their threes and hitting their threes and doing that at a pretty good clip? That's why a lot of people looked at them as being a dangerous 6 seed in the Western Conference.
I mean, absolutely. And them being favored, the disrespect on the books for Sacramento. And in a way, I get it because, look, the Warriors have been to the mountaintop a zillion times in the last decade. Who's Sacramento? They haven't been in the postseason since 2006. But it's so funny that there are only 2 Western Conference teams that had an over 500 road record in this season. Everybody else under 500. And when you're seeing what Steph Curry did, he shoots better at home, especially from long range. So was looking at that 3-point prop, and it was at 4.5. And you had to be looking at that because I think he averages over 5 threes at home. And when you have a team that really lives or dies by the three, which is what this team does, because they have a lot of rawness inside. Kevon Looney is not a good post player. However, he came through big with the 20 boards last night. But with Golden State, the one thing I worry about with them is that if Sacramento finds a way to defend the perimeter, and Moose, I think about this a lot because you got Harrison Barnes on the Kings. He knows this Warriors team. He was on that first championship team with them, and he was a pretty good defender back then. It kind of surprises me that the Warriors are still able to get as many open looks as they have. And I'm not surprised that they performed well, especially with no Draymond Green. That's what championship teams do. But with Sacramento's lack of defense, that's going to be a problem. And when the Warriors are as on as they've been and Sacramento has no answer for them on the perimeter, this series is one that's said it's already been exciting. I think it could go the distance here. And I know that you said that you're more on Sacramento. I've been on the Warriors in this series. Naturally, though, I was very nervous when Draymond Green was suspended because that takes care of any toughness that they had virtually in the post, and Looney was able to come through.
Yeah, Looney did come through last night. And to play to your point, I mean, the total in the game, I think, was 240.5. It wasn't even close to the total. Golden State can win games like that where it's 114-97 the final. If Sacramento doesn't score, north of 110 points, they're not winning a basketball game. I mean, Fancy, you said it. They're just not good enough defensively to be able to do that. So now that's a 2-1 series. Draymond will be available for game 4. Golden State can even up that series and then set it up as a best 2 of 3 with Sacramento still having home court advantage. And then you get to the night game in Los Angeles, the Clippers and the Suns, as Phoenix takes a 2-1 series lead, wins game 3 in Los Angeles, 129-124. Fancy, here's the deal. I love Kawhi Leonard. The man is just never healthy. I couldn't believe it. We've been talking about Tyler Hero being out and the Draymond suspension and Giannis being out for Milwaukee. There was no word whatsoever that Kawhi Leonard was dealing with any sort of a knee issue. And then word comes out yesterday, what was it, 4 o'clock, 3?
Yeah.
It was 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon that Kawhi Leonard is not going to be playing last night for the Los Angeles Clippers. I mean, out of nowhere, then, he's day-to-day, might be available for game 4. They don't have Paul George. Give him credit when you're getting guys like Bones Highland dropping in 20 points for the Los Angeles Clippers, and they kept it, within range. They didn't get embarrassed, but how about if you were a Clipper fan and you bet that game early after game 2 and thinking that, okay, well, I'm going to get Kawhi and it's going to be playoff Kawhi, and then all of a sudden he's not available. There was no way the Clippers were beating the Phoenix Suns last night without Paul George and Kawhi Leonard.
It goes back to what we were talking about last week when the books opened with the favorites to win the championship on DraftKings, at least. The Clippers were number 2. And I never understood that because this team had yet to prove that they could be healthy around postseason times. And look what we're seeing right now. The Kawhi Leonard injury, you think it's bad for Clippers fans. Imagine covering DraftKings and FanDuel content for fantasyalarm.com, where I'm putting in DFS value plays. I'm doing hours of research on these players here because for me, I'm a perfectionist. Yeah. I want to get every player right. I want every value play to give us that 5x return. Had I maybe known this, something that should have been brought to my attention yesterday, had I known this in advance, then Norman Powell would have been in that video for sure, and he dropped 41 points. But with Kawhi Leonard, we didn't know that he hurt the knee. He sprained his knee in game 1. We didn't know that he was still playing through the pain in game 2. And when I saw that injury note come out, I just shook my head, man, because there's nothing you could do at that point. You got to get your content in early so it can marinate a little bit so enough people can see it. And if I knew that 4 hours earlier, I would have had a half of a different video. And like you said, Moose, Kawhi Leonard, one of the best wings of the last 10 years and maybe even all time as well. You think about some of the small forwards throughout history, guys like even LeBron James and Elgin Baylor. Kawhi Leonard is up there on that list because he's such a great two-way player and was such a key on those Spurs team. And the reason why the Raptors won their title in 2019 was because of Kawhi Leonard. But like you said, he can't stay healthy. And when you do give the guy 40 minutes like he played in game 2, he can't recover. His body is just not made for it with all that load management. You talk about fantasy for fantasy basketball leagues. You're not drafting this guy. He's the antithesis on what you want sitting out every other game. The load management did nothing for him because look where we're at right now. Clippers needing a win, no Paul George, and he's ruled out and is still, by the way, day to day with a sprained knee. If it's really a sprained knee and not a tweak or anything like that, we may not see him for game 4.
Yeah, we might not see him. And then the Clippers not winning this series and beating the Phoenix Suns, even though there's concern here, Fensty. And I saw, ESPN chatting about it the other day. And I know you look at these kind of things as well when you're looking at the Phoenix Suns. I mean, they're so top heavy. I mean, can the Suns really win an NBA title when you have Durant logging 38 to 43 minutes a game, Chris Paul logging 37 plus minutes a game, Devin Booker played 45 minutes last night. DeAndre Ayton played 35 minutes. I mean, they're starters. Even Craig played 27 minutes. I mean, they got a little bit of relief off the bench from, Biyombo Lee and Warren and guys like that, but not all that much. Can their starters, can Phoenix hold up physically? Paul's got a history of getting hurt in the playoffs, and we know Kevin Durant is more hurt in the regular season than the postseason, despite the torn Achilles that he suffered with Golden State when he came back in that Toronto series. But can they hold up physically for a long run here if you've got a ticket on the Phoenix Suns to win an NBA title?
I think they can, but I thought that they were going to, at the beginning of the playoffs, I thought that they were going to represent the West. You got a healthy Kevin Durant back in there. I think that they're very well coached. I know that they've had a little bit of drama between Monty Williams and guys like DeAndre Ayton and stuff like that, but they were able to put it to the side and hang in there in the West. Do I think they can? Yes, but I mentioned this before. Cameron Payne, who's been dealing with this back injury, we haven't seen him in the playoffs. He needs to come back. This series, they're going to get bailed out. They're facing a hurt team that happens to be a good defensive team. And guys like Russell Westbrook, that this world is, backwards when Russell Westbrook is playing good defense and making key defensive plays against Devin Booker. So I think that the Suns get a little bit of a break, and especially now with Kawhi Leonard dealing with this sprained knee. But then you think about their next matchup. Remember, in the NBA playoffs, there's no reseeding. So their next matchup is against the regular season Western Conference champs in Denver, who I don't think they're filled with the most amount of depth as well. But then you run into some of the other teams, Moose, and I get a little concerned because they need Chris Paul passing, not scoring. They need Devin Booker being as on fire as he was last game. They need Kevin Durant firing on all cylinders as well. And when you don't have those extra players off the bench, and you mentioned Torrey Craig, they got some help from him over the last couple of games, hitting some big threes. They don't have a lot of depth. So, yes, it does concern me a little bit. But I think one of the things that the Suns can do to help themselves, and I don't know why I don't see this, Moose, maybe because I'm an old soul, maybe I'm a traditionalist, maybe because my favorite positions in the NBA, the sport I love most, are power forward and centers, because I had a dream that one day me standing at 5'11", overweight and everything like that was going to be the next Charles Oakley, and I love the traditional power forward and center. Let these centers bang. The floor stretching ability, nobody gets fooled by that anymore. Nobody. Every center pretty much can shoot threes outside of maybe Rudy Gobert. DeAndre Ayton is a very solid mid-range player, but one thing he doesn't do, Moose, he doesn't post up at all. He doesn't back down. He doesn't post up. He doesn't call for the ball. We grew up on Patrick Ewing, Mr. Post Up, move through the middle, move to how much size he has, the wingspan, call some plays for the guy in the post. The worst that can happen is he draws contact and gets either a Vitsa Zubac or Mason Plumlee in foul trouble. But the Suns refuse to do that, and I really don't know why, because when your back is to the basket, one of the advantages of posting up as opposed to just hanging there at the elbow squared up, when you're posted up, you get the ball in the post, somebody else can cut, and because of the way you're positioned, you automatically set the screen. You're positioned like this, you set the screen very quickly, and that's it. And Ayton can do that with his size, and the Suns haven't figured it out with him yet, and it really frustrates me, as you can see.
You confident Suns win this series? I am.
Yes, I am. I mean, the Clippers the Clippers, unfortunately for them, they don't play good front court defense, great wing defense, but their top wing defenders, who are two of the top wing defenders in the league, are both hurt. We don't know if we're going to see Paul George. We don't think so in this series.
I don't think so.
We don't know when we're going to see Kawhi.
I'll tell you. I mean, like, I don't know, and it's hard. I mean, it's a knee sprain. He played with it in game 2, maybe the time off. But if Kawhi Leonard can play, he should play game 4.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they can't fall behind 3-1, losing both games at home in Los Angeles, and then come back and win that series. Like, I don't think the Suns are going to.
It's not going to happen, and you have to really the only way.
Win 2 of those next 3 games on the road in Phoenix. That's not going to happen.
The Suns have to all be off shooting, and the best Suns team is one where Chris Paul doesn't have to score. You want to see him in total pass mode and just completely feeding, and that's why I think you need to get DeAndre Ayton more involved. And how you do that, besides trying to get him an open look from mid-range, have him post up more. He's going to see nothing but success. He's a better player than what the Clippers can throw at him. Mason Plumlee doesn't play a lick of defense. Zubac is just as bad. Bottom 5 team at defending centers. The Suns just need to figure it out, because guess what? Guess who he has next? Nikola Jokic. Also not one of the best defensive centers, but he's bigger in size and he can move. So Ayton's not going to get those high percentage looks from mid-range like he's getting now.
He's Justin Fensterman. I'm Mark Malusis. The show is Moose and Keith. We'll come back. You got a firing in the NBA. We'll get into that. We got some MLB notes to get into, some interesting NFL news as well. Plus, we're going to play a little game a little bit later on. We'll preview the NBA games tonight. We'll preview the NHL games as well, get some picks, fire them out there. Dave Sharapan will join us at the bottom of the 11 o'clock hour. It is an action-packed Friday right here. Moose and Keith, Fensty in for Keith on a Friday. Better Sports Network.
Moose and Keith, weekdays at 10 a.m. Eastern.
The word genius is there. Bob Glauber, it describes him. Bob, so when's the last time that Twitter defeated you? Because I've been defeated by Twitter today.
I'll tell you how Twitter defeated me one time. I had the mistaken impression that the year that Troy Polamalu won the Defensive Player of the Year, it looked like it was going to go to Clay Matthews Jr., and I tweeted it. And there was a guy on the media bus. He was like, oh, yeah, he's got it, a guy I trust. I won't tell you who it was, but his initials are Mike Garafalo. So I went with it. Got a DM from Rich Eisen, NFL Network. He goes, you sure about that? I go, oh, man. Oh, I just got this wave. Because, like, accuracy to me is really important. So I'm literally on the media bus. We're just getting back from media day. We are slipping and sliding in Dallas. It's snowing. I get off the bus. I open my laptop. I am hunched over. And I just, like, literally people are passing me. Bob, what's wrong? And it was Polamalu. And Adam Schefter had retweeted me. Trey Wingo had retweeted me. I'm like, oh, I'm dead.
So when it's Polamalu, then how do you handle that? Like, what was the subsequent tweet
I think
afterward?
I said, got some bad Twitter info. I didn't put Garafalo's name on there. I had to
10 years later, you can out him. I like that. Yeah.
You know, he wouldn't mind that. He knows the stories.
Yeah.
He actually said to me, hey, Bob, I think you might have jumped the gun on that. I was like, oh, crap. There we go.
Campus to Canton on the Better Sports Network.
Would Dion bench Shedeur?
I don't think he would.
Like, how bad would it have to be? Because we've seen horrendous quarterback play from this Colorado team for the last, 5 years? JT Shroud, Brandon Lewis, just terrible quarterback play. Like, they were 131st, which is dead last in pass EPA per play. Obviously, it will be better, but how bad does it have to be for him to bench his own son? Like, I'm not sure he will ever either, like, especially with the attitude that he came in with.
If they don't get Rashada, who do they bench him for this year anyway? I don't know that there's another answer on that roster that you go to. They don't really have a guy behind him, so I don't even know if we would know the answer to that until the next year, assuming that, he doesn't declare for the draft, he returns, they bring somebody else that's competent and behind him.
If they're going to do this the Lincoln Riley way, next year would be the class to bring somebody in. Shedeur Sanders is going to be a third-year player, so he's going to play 2023. I don't think he's declaring for the 2024 NFL draft, so he's going to play in 2024 and then declare for the 2025 NFL draft. And let's remember this, he hasn't had a full recruiting cycle at Colorado. He will have that next recruiting cycle, so maybe he could get one of these class of 2024 quarterbacks that come to Colorado.
However you're invested in sports, from betting to fantasy, collectibles, and more, join our community on Better Sports Network.
One of my kids' favorite songs. Every time you got to pump jumping up in the Malusa's car where we're headed to some sporting event or some game, whatever it might be. He's Justin Fensterman. I'm Mark Malusas. The show is Moose and Keith here, coming to you on a Friday on Better Sports Network. Before we hit the airways, Justin, news came out of Toronto just quickly because, it was breaking news. Nick Nurse out after 5 years as head coach of the Toronto Raptors. They want a little bit of a reset. The Raptors obviously were part of the play-in tournament. They didn't last all that long, blew that huge lead against the Chicago Bulls, which was terrible and a bad look up there in Toronto. But I think Nurse is a good coach. I'll be honest with you, I do. I think he'll get another opportunity to be a head coach in the NBA if he wants it. Maybe he does want to do a little bit of a personal reset. I don't think it was a lack of preparedness. I think it just grew a little bit stale, and I also think the organization never recovered after Kawhi decided to leave Toronto, winning that NBA title, and go to Los Angeles and play for the Clippers. They just never reset, but they've got some good players on that team. It'll be interesting. Maybe they need a new voice. Maybe they do, but Nurse out as head coach up in Toronto.
And I don't think it's right, Moose. I'm shocked that if I'm any of these NBA teams, I'm salivating right now wanting this guy because he won over 58% of his games. Great character guy as well for the locker room. And I normally roll my eyes with that, but you've seen so many of those positive reports, and there were a lot of personalities on those Raptors teams. I don't blame him, though, for the lack of success this year because of a few things. And I don't think people realize this. When you're a team and you're a coach that runs a very tight rotation, like Tom Thibodeau, he runs a very tight rotation as well. We're talking 7-8 guys really that are getting somewhat impactful minutes. And
hard to break that rotation.
So it's hard to break the rotation. But here's the problem with what the Raptors were facing at the beginning of the year. They always had a guy out. It almost seemed like their starting five was never all healthy together. Whether it was Anunoby out for a couple of games, and then Barnes was out for a couple of games, Van Vliet too, and Siakam. They didn't have their full core, and when you're running as tight of a rotation where you really rely on your starters, that messes with team chemistry right there. And also the other thing that was hanging over their head was that you thought for at least a couple of months that two of those starters were going to be traded. Pascal Siakam was on the block. OG Anunoby was all but gone. Gary Trent, all but gone. Fred Van Vliet, did they want to pay him? He was all but gone as well. So when you have that going on in the organization, the fear of the unknown, and you're hearing for months on end that the Raptors, they're going to be sellers, they're going to be sellers, they're going to be sellers. Trade deadline comes, and this team is buying Jakob Poeltl at this point, who they actually coincidentally traded in the Kawhi Leonard deal when they sent him and DeRozan packing to San Antonio. So they get Poeltl back. So that was very head-scratching to me because I thought that a few of those guys were leaving. So with all of that to mind, plus the fact that you didn't have all five of their original starters healthy at one point for most of the first half of the year, I almost felt like this was a bit unfair. It's not Coach Nurse's fault that this happened.
Couple of things in Major League Baseball. Number one is that if you are a Max Scherzer owner in fantasy, he's going to be out for the next 10 games because he's accepted his 10-game suspension. He's not going to fight it at the behest of the Mets, and he met with the media yesterday. And listen, Fenty, I don't know. I don't look at Scherzer as a cheat. I really don't. I think there are baseball and sports. There are guys that are inherently a product, whether it be a PEDs or spin rate. When you look at Spider Tack, I think Max Scherzer just pushed the rule, didn't understand the rule, and look at it that way. I believe him. I don't think the intent Wednesday in Los Angeles was for Scherzer for him to go to the mound and try and cheat. I think he just didn't really understand the rule book because he's screaming at the umpire and telling him it's just rosin. Well, if you look at the substance, if you look at the doctored ball memo that was put out by Major League Baseball, you can use too much rosin to create, a sticky substance, whether it be on the hand or the glove, that you can be tossed from the game from. I think it's just as simple as that. I think he'll make the adjustment. Maybe there needs to be a little bit more clarity from Major League Baseball. I think that's something that we can have a discussion about, Fensty, but I don't look at Scherzer now, and I don't change my perception of what Max Scherzer is as a pitcher.
No, and especially if you're going to have everything like rosin bags and everything like that, and pitchers their routine is to pick up that rosin bag, and they're in the heat. They're also using their hands. Your hands are sometimes just going to get sticky. They asked him to change the glove and wash his hands at first on the first check, and he did that. And I saw your tweet, Moose, and I'm a little bit confused by that as well. Why he's using rubbing alcohol.
Well, someone explained to me the rubbing alcohol gets it off your hands a lot easier. But if you're going to use the rubbing alcohol to clean your hands, and then you're going to apply a rosin right afterward that then creates the same sticky substance, then aren't you defeating the purpose of using the alcohol?
Right. So that part I didn't understand. But here's the deal, Moose, and you're going to laugh with this here. I actually have some expertise in this because I was a varsity bowler in high school. That's right. I was a captain.
You and we were both bowlers growing up, Benstein. Look at that. It's like kismet.
2-year captain of the Oyster Bay High School varsity bowling team. So here's the deal. Here's why I say this, not to just say I was a bowler, nothing to brag about anyway, but you know the rosin bags that bowlers use.
Yeah.
The rosin bags, and when you're using your hand and you can dry it as much as possible on the little air dryer by the ball rack, after a few frames, your hands is naturally going to get sticky if you're using the rosin bag. It just happens. And I think I side with you on this, where the league needs more clarity on this, sometimes hands are going to be sticky. When I was bowling in high school, and it was customary, after my frame, my teammate would toss me the rosin bag every time. You toss the person the rosin bag, you catch it, do a little thing, you put it down. And even when you try to dry your hand, me also being a little bit of a nervous Nelly when I would play sports, my hands were always sweaty too. Sometimes hands are just sticky, and this ump is notorious for a hand just being sticky, throwing players out. And I did not expect that to happen, especially when they checked him the first time and everything seemed fine and he was able to change the glove and everything, wash his hands. I was shocked when he got thrown out, and then immediately you knew that suspension was coming.
Now, we mentioned about the cheating aspect, Fenstein. Now, another guy who made his return last night for the San Diego Padres, and that is Fernando Tatis Jr. My boys love Tatis, love watching his videos on YouTube, Fernando and everything like that. And he's the exuberance, the joy in which he plays the game. He's got a little bit of a hill to overcome based on the suspension, and he went 0 for 5 in his return with a couple strikeouts, did Tatis Jr. He's still a wonderful player. There's no question about it, but the perception, just like is the perception from my perception of Max Scherzer has not changed. The perception of Fernando Tatis Jr. has changed when, I've got a 10, 8, and 6-year-old, 3 boys. When they're asking me, is Fernando Tatis Jr. a cheater? Well, the answer to that is yes. Well, what did he do? Well, he used performance-enhancing drugs. Then you get into to go down the rabbit hole of, well, what are PEDs? And then how does it affect the body? All of these things, because kids are naturally curious. So you go down that rabbit hole. But Tatis Jr., for fantasy owners there, Fenstein, for baseball fans, what version do you think we're going to get? Because not only does he have to stay healthy physically, there's also a mental aspect to Tatis as well, coming back, understanding that everyone around Major League Baseball knows that outside of the motorcycle or moped accident that he initially had, that he was also suspended by Major League Baseball for using a performance-enhancing drug.
I think that it does change him a little bit. I think that because we're so used to it now, I mean, Moose, we remember the Mitchell Report and everything, all of our heroes from the 90s that were getting called out. And it seemed like it was just about anybody with power that was getting called out. Now I almost feel like we're used to it. So the new generation of sports fans will be a little bit more forgiving. I'm not one of those people, though. Yes, it's going to take him a few years, and hopefully you forget about it after a few years. But look, Moose, when it comes to cheating in sports, people still get at the Astros. Yankee fans especially here thinking they were robbed of a championship because of what Houston did with the trash cans. People are still not over that. People don't forget. That's what it really comes down to. So, yeah, he is viewed a little bit differently, and you can forgive, but you can't forget, because you're always going to be thinking, at least for me, that even though this guy is young and he could be clean for the next 5 to 10 years, it's always going to go back to that, at least for me. I mean, even Moose, someone like Alex Rodriguez, and you being in the area at the time when he was going through his stuff, because A-Rod, I mean, look, A-Rod was a little bit of a heel at the times with things he said and things he did. But still, when that happened, I almost felt like Yankee fans were just so sad about the situation, and they still haven't gotten over it from A-Rod, and that was, over 10 years ago.
Yeah, and I think also when the shots at Jeter initially, and then him kind of having this air about him when you look at Alex Rodriguez, where he kind of wanted the acceptance into the Yankee club before he had kind of earned his way into the Yankee club. So a little bit different. But yeah, Tatis Jr., I still think he's going to have a big year. Do you think he's going to hit well this year, Fence?
I do. I mean, look, he was fine in the minors before serving the suspension. I think he'll be fine. Last night wasn't one of those nights. I saw his first at-bat when he struck out. He struck out a couple of times, 0 for 5. So I think he'll get a few games under him, and that's fine. You mentioned the mental aspect. I'm sure that's going to impact him a bit, but then after a couple of months, he'll get back in the groove. And I think that because you spend so much time with your teammates, as long as your teammates are there supporting you, being like, hey, man, it's okay, it's going to be okay, you could kind of fade out that noise from the media because, look, nobody's going to forget. People like to hold things over these athletes' heads for some reason, especially on social media. And I just think that's how it's going to be for him. And one of the things, Moose, that makes me sad, especially being a father, thinking about this, I mean, your boys are asking you about this. They're obviously curious on why he had to use this stuff for the game. If it's cheating, then I worry about even our kids, when they go to play baseball, well, my hero, Fernando Tatis, did this. I'm going to try to find a way to cut corners or a workaround if I want to play baseball to improve the power. And it's going to take away from the good old fashioned hard work and work ethic that a lot of players, like my favorite, Ken Griffey Jr., who, Moose, I don't know if you agree with me or not, but looking at his body type throughout his career, and that's one of the reasons why he remained my favorite baseball player of all time, was that I don't believe he ever used anything. The body type to me never changed. He suffered all the injuries, never really fully recovered once he started suffering them in Cincinnati. And the guy could do just about anything, had one of the greatest swings out there. The backwards, he made wearing your hat backwards cool. So much about him, Moose. And I never thought that he was on anything. And to this day, I still believe that.
All right, let's get into the playoffs tonight, Fensty. And I don't disagree with you about Griffey. One of the only autographed baseball bats that I actually bought, I think, off of the Home Shopping Network one.
I have an autographed motion picture card of him.
That's awesome.
When you tilt the card, it's like you see him swinging through and everything like that.
Yeah, I love Griffey had the prettiest swing. There's no prettier swing that I've ever seen in all of Major League Baseball, the history of Major League Baseball.
I almost got my ear pierced because of Ken Griffey Jr.
Did you really?
I didn't end up doing it though. But
how close were you getting your ears pierced?
I was pretty close a couple of times. You don't remember, Moose? I mean, it was back then. I mean, there was a time, Moose, where I watched you on TV and you had those highlights in your hair. Unfortunately for me, I've been losing my hair since the George H.W. Bush administration, so I didn't get the pleasure of doing that. But at the same time, earrings and especially like highlights in your hair, very popular back in the late 90s.
That was a mistake. That was a mistake. Be honest with you, that was a mistake when I got convinced to do that. I was like, oh, that was an instant regret.
Yeah. I remember when I think the Rays were on like a losing streak when Lou Piniella was managing them, and he says, look, if you win, not thinking they were going to win, I'll dye my hair. And then he had to dye his hair blonde.
I know, crazy. Let's get into the playoff games now. Let's start with the NBA. I've got some NHL picks, Fensty, as well, and we'll get into some other things. We'll get into a little bit of a game here in a little bit as well that Fensty posed this morning, and it's going to be fun to kind of run around some things. Celtics and Hawks tonight down in Atlanta. Boston laying 5.5 on the road. They're minus 220 on the money line. The total in the game is sitting at 228.
I still like the Celtics in this game. I just think the Hawks really don't play any defense. I've been very impressed with what I've seen from some of their ancillary pieces, like DeAndre Hunter, who I think is a player in this league, often gets taken out of the conversation when it comes to
everything well.
He does. But the problem is the Hawks have been loaded with too many forwards, and they have a tremendous problem, Moose. They have a disease, and it's called the John Collins disease. They can't shake it, man. They can't shake the John Collins.
They try and get rid of him every year, and they can't. Like every year, John Collins is on the trade block. Every summer, he's on the trade block. Every NBA trade deadline, the Atlanta's trying to move John Collins. You see that headline. They never move him.
Yeah, they don't, and that's because he doesn't have an impact on defense whatsoever. His post play is kind of crappy, and the only thing the guy can do is hit mid-range shots and shots from the corner from 3. That's really all John Collins brings. So like you said, it could be Halloween trick-or-treat. You couldn't give this guy away like candy. So that's a big problem with them, and I think it limits a guy like DeAndre Hunter. And also something else that I think limits him too, because when you have Trae Young and DeJounte Murray on your team that are both very ball dominant, the ball can only go around so much throughout the game. And then you got Bogdan Bogdanovic off the bench as well, who bringing him in there to hit threes. I just think Hunter often gets marginalized in this rotation when you have too many swingmen and too many forwards to deal with and 2 ball-dominant guards. Somebody is essentially going to get canceled out, and unfortunately, I think that's been Hunter. But we've seen him have some very nice moments here in the playoffs. But I don't think Atlanta wins this game, man.
Yeah, I don't think Atlanta wins the game either. I will tell you this though. I'll take the Hawks plus 116 opening quarter.
Okay. You know what?
And I would probably take Atlanta plus the 1.5 in the opening quarter as well. I think if you're going to get the best of Atlanta, it's going to be early on in this game. Feed off the emotion, get off to a good start. The crowd, if you've got the Celtics to win this series in 5 games, this is the game. Like, this is the game Atlanta has to win. They lose tonight. And, I mean, Fency and I are both in agreement, like looking at this series, totally agree with them, that Atlanta just doesn't play enough defense. I think Atlanta, I'm going to go on the emotion, down 2-0. They get off to a good start tonight. I would take the Hawks in the opening quarter, but I would agree with you. I would take the Celtics for the game.
Yeah, I'm looking at the opening quarters, by the way, moves from both of the games. You had Boston win the first quarter in game 2, 28-25, which is actually very encouraging to me. I like seeing that because when you're looking to make a bet like that, it's not necessarily like it has to happen that Atlanta wins. They have to keep it competitive. Now, in game 1 of the series, yeah, that was a 10-point quarter, but you like to look at the last game. It's not like you're looking at full season-long stats anymore. You're looking at what they did the last time out. And I agree with you, Moose. I mean, the game's going to be in Atlanta. You're right about the emotional factor. If I think the Hawks are going to be able to win this first quarter, I think what they do is they almost use Trae Young as a decoy. Don't let him shoot so much. Let Murray try to drive and draw contact, because when you're facing a good defensive team like Boston, you want to try to get some of their good defenders out of the game early and into foul trouble so they play with a little bit more of timid kind of attitude. And I think for the Hawks, they should be in full attack mode, try to attack the paint as much as possible. And then until Boston's able to readjust, then you have the defense collapsing more, and then you bring in Trae Young, and he gets higher percentage shots from 3.
All right, let's get into the Knicks game. Tips off at 8:30 tonight. Does the Knicks, they're back home, Madison Square Garden, game 3, series knotted up at a game apiece. The line was 2 yesterday. The Knicks are a 1.5-point favorite. Fensty, as we wake up this morning, the total in the game is sitting at 211. I think this, I'm going to go, I mentioned it, Sharapan's talked about it, you've talked about it, like kind of the zigzag theory when you look at playoff series. You saw Cleveland respond in game 2 from what happened in game 1. I think you're going to see the Knicks respond after what game 2 and game 3 tonight. I think game 4 ultimately is going to decide what kind of series are we going to have. Are we going to have a series that goes 7 games? Or are we going to have a series where the Knicks take a 3-1 series lead going back to Cleveland? I don't know if I necessarily think the Cavaliers, figured something out with the Knicks in game 2. Now, Garland had himself a game. He finished the game with 32 points, right? He had 26 in the first half. I think he did. They ran him off the court in that second quarter in game 2. The Knicks are going to need somebody outside of Randall and Brunson tonight. IQ, Grimes. I'm not going to hold out hope that it's going to be RJ Barrett. I do think, we talk about the emotion, like Madison Square Garden tonight at 8:30 with that game tipping off is going to be an unbelievable atmosphere. I think the Knicks, I would take the Knicks. I would lay the 1.5.
Yeah, I think that the Knicks are going to win this game as well. I think we end up with a 2-2 series. And unfortunately, and I said this before, and I know Baby J is not going to like to hear this, and he's going to have to get his vocal pipes ready to sing. I still think it's going to be the Cavs in 6 ultimately, Moose. I just think that they play better defense. They've got enough offensive weapons. You're seeing what Karis LeVert can bring to the table for this Cleveland team as well. With the Knicks tonight, though, because I'm waiting for Donovan Mitchell to light up the Garden, and I really do feel that Donovan Mitchell is playing with an extra chip on his shoulder because He wanted to go to New York so badly. And the Knicks wanted him too, but the Knicks stopped wanting him. And to Mitchell, doesn't matter what the asking price is to him. He thinks that he's worth it. He could be worth the keys to Madison Square Garden. He's going to think with his level of play, he's worth it. So I'm wondering when that explosive game is going to come. The Knicks played in game 2 like, okay, we got our split already. We're good. This is house money right there. You can't play like that.
I agree. I hated their effort in game 2.
It was hard. What effort, Moose? You and I are putting in more effort on this show than the Knicks did in the entirety of game 2. There was no effort. They took game 1. They're like, okay, we got our split. House money, best defensive team in the NBA. Now we'll go back to the Garden and see if we can take advantage at home, which is a very bad attitude and a very Knicks attitude that we've seen in the past. How many times we've seen them put on a very strong game 1 and then get blown away game 2. Tonight, though, I think the key for the Knicks, just like in game 1, the health of Josh Hart. Josh Hart wasn't moving around, man. That ankle injury that he suffered, he just wasn't moving the same. I'm hoping with a few days of rest that they're able to get the best of Josh Hart, because this is no coincidence, everyone. Josh Hart can play 4 positions. That's right. I'm going to say it again. Josh Hart can play 4 positions on the floor. You need him to play a smaller power forward, he could do that. You need him to run the point, he could do that effectively. You need him to be a 3 and D guy on the wing, he can do that. And there are not many players like that. And unfortunately, Moose, RJ Barrett is just such a poor shooter from the outside that the Cavs are going to give him 6-7 feet every single time. And here's my counter to that, Moose. If I'm the coach, here's my counter to that. If RJ Barrett is getting as much space as he's getting, because he's an excellent ball handler and driver, although he's made poor decisions driving into traffic, which shows the lack of maturity in that area, why can't he just dribble the ball 3 feet in? Now you're 2 feet inside the arc. You get a nice open mid-range shot. I think until the Cavs have someone coming out to guard him and to close out his space, instead of shooting the 3, which you only hit 30% of your threes, take a few dribbles in, take a nice little mid-range baby jumper, and you'll have more success that way.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I really don't. I agree with you about RJ, but Fancy, it's come to a point to me with RJ Barrett where I'm trying to stop figuring it out. It's like a Rubik's Cube. It really is. Like, I don't know what's going on.
I love the work ethic. I love his ability to drive. I think he's a very good attacker.
I think he's got a really calm, cool demeanor. He's still too left-handed oriented. Yeah, I mean, he needs to, Baby Jay's saying he needs to show something tonight. I mean, I think the guy, if you get a guy, and I agree with you can't count on Hart, I think it's got to be IQ. I mean, it's strange, Fancy. Does it strike you funny how the NBA announces these awards? Like, it just comes out of nowhere. It's like no rhyme or reason. All of a sudden, Malcolm Brogdon's the 6th man of the year. Like, there's no build-up or anything like that. It's just like, here's the announcement. It's Malcolm Brogdon.
What do you think of that call? Because I think that
I thought IQ deserved it. He was minus 330. IQ was the 6th man of the year.
So let me tell you about the odds, Moose, because remember, these awards are voted on here. Everybody has to be careful with what they're seeing with the odds. The reason that you saw, because Malcolm Brogdon had full control of this award, absolutely deserved it. He is the dictionary, the Webster's dictionary definition of a 6th man. He didn't start it all year. You saw Emmanuel Quickly when the Knicks were on that winning streak. You saw Quickly come through in a big way. Jalen Brunson got hurt, and he was able to do more and have more command of the offense, and then the odds shifted heavily in his favor. But when you look at the season as a whole, Emmanuel Quickly didn't have as good of stats across the board as Malcolm Brogdon. Brogdon was a better shooter, better defender, and Brogdon's not even that good of a defender. More rebounds he averaged, more assists he averaged, more points he averaged. He shot better than him. And like I said, the guy didn't start one time the entire season. And I know that you can't hold that against Emmanuel Quickly, because if Jalen Brunson is hurt, you need this guy to be running the point and to show the scoring ability. I thought the right decision was made. I put that out on Twitter at Fensty Sports. I put it out on Twitter. I've been putting it out on Twitter for months. Malcolm Brogdon fully deserved that award over IQ.
Yeah, I mean, we'll agree to disagree. I thought it should have been IQ. I get the point in the disparity where Brogdon's actually a pure 6th man as compared to when you look at IQ. I do think, though, tonight, Fensty, Quickly's got to show something. Like, you're going to – yeah, Hart is not 100%. He's not. I can't count on Barrett. I mean, I can't go into a game thinking, oh, this is going to be RJ Barrett's game. He's just not that caliber of player at this stage, and everyone likes to tell you that he's young. I think it's got to be IQ tonight. as the Knicks are a 1.5-point favorite in Game 3, taking on the
And
Cleveland
he's going to be playing with a chip on his shoulder because he lost that award. Players love to win awards. Players love to get that spotlight.
No
and
question.
I'm sure that Emmanuel quickly was thinking like you were, minus 260, 360 to win the award. He's looking at the books. Everybody is. And boom, just like that, randomly, after we find out that Kawhi Leonard is out for his game, where we're like, what the hell's going on? Malcolm Brogdon, boom, just like that, wins the award.
All right, Denver tonight. They're on the road in Minnesota. If you've got the Nuggets, say it's played exact series, they win this in 5 games, knock it off the Minnesota Timberwolves, then you have to expect Minnesota to win tonight. Because just like we were talking about Celtics and Hawks, tonight's tonight. Like if Minnesota falls behind 3-0, I mean, the series is over anyway. Minnesota's not beating Denver in a 7-game series. We're just talking about the fact of how if you pick Denver in a certain amount of games, I still am going to take Denver, even though Minnesota I thought was exhausted game 1, showed themselves a lot better in game number 2. There's things about Minnesota that I think can frustrate Denver, but I just don't see them being efficient enough. I mean, are they going to get the same type of performance against like they did in game 2 from Anthony Edwards? And they still lost that game. What would make the argument tonight for the T-Wolves to be able to get this and make it a 2-1 series in game 3?
So Karl Anthony Towns needs to do something that he's allergic to doing. And I don't know if there's anything that he could take to get the effects of the allergy. He's allergic, Moose. And I don't know if you know this, again, I'm not a doctor or anything. He's allergic to playing defense. Very highly allergic, hives, eyes getting all swollen, everything.
Right.
And he just does not play a lick of defense. For a guy who's as massive as he is size-wise, and especially with the twin tower effect that they have between him and Rudy Gobert, who I don't think is 100%. I think that he's a little bit banged up right now. They should be able to close out that lane every single time. And they're just unable to do that. And by the way, speaking of closing games, you saw it in the Laker game. They had the Lakers. They had them in that game. They ran out of gas. What you saw here in the last game in this series, they were coming back furiously. They took the lead. Then they ran out of gas again in Denver. Jamal Murray was able to take over. So can Anthony Edwards have the same game that he had? Yes. Is Karl Anthony Towns going to do anything to close out that lane? No, because he forfeits defense. That's just what he does. And I think Denver's going to be all over them. I'm not betting this game on the spread. I am looking at that low total, and this is where I will go back to regular season games. We've seen this total go over the 208 more often than not. And I think that this is going over tonight because I think Minnesota is putting everything on the line. They're going to take some chances. But I think with what we've seen from Denver, as long as Michael Porter Jr. doesn't just stay at the arc and he actually attacks the rim like we saw early in the series, I think Denver's going up 3-0, and I have the over in the 208 here.
Yeah, I'll take Denver. I'll lay the 2 in the game. We'll come back. We got a little game to play. I'll fire out some NHL picks as well, and Sharapan's going to join Fensty and myself right at the bottom of the hour at 11:30. He's Justin Fensterman. We call him Fensty. Everybody, aside from his wife, calls him Fensty as well. I'm Mark Malusis. My wife has never called me Moose, but other people have. It's Moose and Keith with you on a Friday right here, Better Sports Network.
Better Sports Network. Collectible moments.
Everybody up here at U.S. Cellular. Sox 5 runs, 6 hits. The 2-1 to Bartlett. Swing, chop to short. Ramirez has it, throws. Burley picks the perfect game. His second no-hitter. People going crazy here at U.S. Cellular. He's mobbed by his teammates. A perfecto.
Now there's a steal by Bird. Underneath the DJ, lays it in. Right out, 1 second left. What a play by Bird. Bird stole the impounding pass. Laid it up to DJ. DJ laid it up and in. And Boston has a 1-point lead with 1 second left.
Out of the I formation on first down. Peterson to carry, looking for running room on the right side, has it to the 25, across the 30, across the 35, and out of bounds at the 40-yard line. Adrian Peterson has just gone over 2,000 yards for the season, the 7th man in NFL history to cross the 2,000-yard mark.
Well, a thundering ovation for number 66, Mario Lemieux.
Just the emotion I'm sure Mario is feeling in this place. You don't appreciate something until it's gone, and it's so great to have Mario back.
Yager turns around. Over to Lemieux. Mario Lemieux, his first goal in his comeback here tonight at the Mellon Arena. And the Penguins lead 3-0, and he is smiling like a butcher's dog, Mario Lemieux.
Oh, the band is out on the field. He's going to go into the end zone. The Bears have scored, but the Bands are out on the field.
Pearson moves in front of the STP Dodge. Petty comes back to the inside. They almost touch as they move down low in the banking. They're going to be side by side as they exit the bank and head for the finish line.
Richard Petty goes back in front. They both spin. They're in the wall. Petty is sliding, slamming into the wall. He's coming down toward the finish line. Will he make it? Pearson is still running. The winner is car number 21. An amazing finish. Richard Petty's car demolished in the front end, as well as car number 21. An unbelievable finish, a terrible crash. David Pearson has won the Daytona 500. Leitner catches, comes down, dribbles, shoots, scores! Christian Leitner has hit the bucket at the buzzer! Pitched by Downing, swinging. There's a drive into left center field. That ball is going to be out of here. It's gone. It's 7-15. There's a new home run champion of all time, and it's Henry Aaron.
The most valuable player is Magic Johnson. 42 points, 15 rebounds, and 7 assists. He starts at center, plays forward and guard, and leads the Los Angeles Lakers to a world championship 123-107 over Philadelphia.
Whether you collect sports memorabilia, fantasy championships, or winning bet slips, talk about it on Better Sports Network.
Welcome back. It's Moose and Keith on a Friday. He's Justin Fensterman in for Keith. I'm Mark Malusis. Got some NHL picks, Fensty, before we get into a little game that you proposed. I love the idea. It's fantastic. I like the Islanders tonight, back home against Carolina. Teravainen out for Carolina. He suffered a broken hand surgery. That was announced by Brindamore after Game 2. The Islanders have played a very, very tight series. Carolina, all they do is play close defensive games. They're minus 122 back at home at UBS Arena later on tonight. I do think the Islanders get themselves back into that series. They're down 2-1. That would be one pick. I like the Bruins on the road in Florida against the Panthers. Still no word about whether or not Patrice Bergeron's going to play, the captain for the Boston Bruins. That series is tied up at a game apiece. We know how historically great Boston was during the regular season. I think they rebound after their loss. They did each and every time during the regular season.
I was shocked about that, by the way, that Florida was able to take it to them like they did.
It was crazy, right? I mean, are you a huge Stanley Cup playoff guy?
So I am not like you can only watch so many sports, especially when we're covering it from the national level. It's not an excuse. It's just a fact. And the NHL, unfortunately, gets the short end of the stick for me. But I love hockey. I love watching playoff hockey as well, and doing some shows, some live in-game shows that I do on other networks. I'm throwing to the feeds and everything. So while you were at the game, I felt like I was at the Ranger Devil game with you last night. So yes, I've been into it, but I was just so shocked about what Florida was able to do, because Boston has seemed to have just a lock on the Eastern Conference for the most part, unless your team name is Carolina. I felt like Boston had pretty much a lock on the Eastern Conference here, and I thought that they'd get through Florida no problem at all.
No, I agree with you. I was surprised by their performance in Game 2. I'd be stunned if they didn't respond tonight. I really would be. And I think the Bruins will respond in kind against the Florida Panthers. I'd lay the 156 on the road. I would also take Dallas on the road minus 110 against the Minnesota Wild. I don't think you're going to see Marc-Andre Fleury in net tonight for the Minnesota Wild after his Game 2 performance. He was terrible. Ottinger's been great for the Dallas Stars all season long. I would take Dallas on the road, and I like the over in the Kings-Oilers games. I mean, Fancy, you know this. I mean, anytime you look at it, it's over 6.5. It's minus 105 right now when you look at it. I think you're going to get goals. That's Game 3 back in Los Angeles. That series is tied up at a game apiece. Edmonton had all kind of heat. McDavid had a historically great year. So 4 picks in the 4 games tonight. Just to recap, I like the Islanders minus 122, Bruins minus 156, the Stars minus 110, and I would take the over in goals between the Oilers and the Kings sitting there at 6.5.
All right, Moose, and let's play a little bit of a game I thought of, and I'll be honest with you. I was in Dunkin' Donuts getting my coffee this morning, and I was thinking about this, and I saw because Dunkin' Donuts and Baskin Robbins are kind of merged. They have been for many years.
I know.
Moose Tracks ice cream, and I'm like, Moose Tracks. And my co-host for today is nicknamed Moose, that everybody calls him except for his wife. By the way, I was thinking about that in the break. I can only imagine. Hey, Moosey, can you mow the lawn, Moosey? Moosey, dear, can you mow the lawn? I was thinking about that and laughing and everything, but I can see why.
Well, how do you get your coffee, Fensty?
I get only ice. I do not drink hot coffee. I am not a fan of hot coffee. Moose, it could be -5 degrees outside.
You're still getting iced coffee.
I'm getting the iced coffee. So iced coffee with almond milk and a Splenda in it.
Oh, there you go. Very nice.
Yes. So
Very
big
good.
almond milk guy. I think it's great.
Yeah,
But
I'm not with you though. I love iced coffee once it starts to get a little warm. You can't make it at home, but usually I'm drinking hot coffee more often than not during the course of the fall and winter. Yeah.
what I do, and I think Dunkin' Donuts gets a little bit annoyed.
Dunkin' Donuts has got great iced coffee.
Yeah, they're amazing. I mean, I'm a Dunkin' Donuts over Starbucks or anything else type of guy. And for me, I order if, like, let's say I just don't have time. I got assignments to do before shows. I just don't have time to go get the coffee. I'll go earlier. I'll get the iced coffee, but I'll ask them, please do not put any ice into it. Keep it cold, but no ice whatsoever. And I don't think the people at Dunkin' Donuts like that, because you're essentially getting more coffee, bigger bang for your buck, because it's kind of like ordering ice. If you order a soda at a restaurant here, you order the ice, you're going to have less of the soda there because the ice.
Well, yeah, they load the cup up with ice, and then all they have to do is fill half the glass, and you've got a glass of soda.
Right. So if you want to cheat the system at Dunkin' Donuts or your neighborhood,
you know what? I'm going to do that. I didn't even think about that.
Yep. No ice.
The last time I went to Starbucks was like 3 weeks ago, and I was dying for caffeine. We've all been there, right? So you need like kind of a little bit of a jolt. I got myself like one of their, I don't know, I forget what it was. It was like one of their special drinks that they had. It was an ice drink because it was warm out.
Was it the Java chip Frappuccino?
No, it wasn't the Java chip Frappuccino. It was something with like cold foam. It was an iced coffee with cold foam. And it was like $7. I was like, and I'm not like, it's not like, I was like, this is ridiculous. I could go to Dunkin' and get a coffee for like $3.50. It's insane.
Yeah, large is, it's weird because I go so often. I know the exact price. A large iced coffee is $5.10 now at my Dunkin' Donuts here in Maryland. So it's up there, but it's worth it. You get the large, you're feeling good for the entire day. But if you're out there and you want to cheat the system a little bit,
ask them, tell them no ice.
No ice. You'll get the look, but hey, the customer's always right. And what's good is because if you got a normal iced coffee and you don't drink it, no matter how frozen you make it, because you're not going to put it in the freezer, that ice is going to melt and it's going to dilute your drink. So you don't have any ice in your drink. They'll fill it all the way up with coffee. Bigger bang for your buck right there, Moose.
All right, let's get to the Moose Tracks, Fensty. You were at Dunkin' this morning. You saw Moose Tracks ice cream from Baskin Robbins, and so you came up with a little bit of a game, which I love.
I did called Moose Tracks in honor of you, Mark Malusis, and with that, I thought that you can essentially make your mark, leaving your own Moose Tracks here on today's betting lines and betting lines for the weekend. And since we were just talking hockey here, I mixed up the sports. Let's start with this one, Moose, here, because I'm going to give you a few props, and you just pick the one prop of the few that you're most comfortable betting for this evening or the weekend. That's how this game goes. Very easy. So for a total goal prop, you were mentioning some of the totals for tonight's action. Hurricanes and the Islanders are at 5 goals. We saw the amount of goals they scored the other night in game 2. So they're at 5. Bruins and Panthers are over 6 goals. We saw what Florida can bring to Boston, which shows they can hold up their end of the bargain. The Stars and the Wild also at a 5.5 goal line here. So if you're picking between Hurricanes and Islanders over 5 goals, Bruins, Panthers over 6 goals, Stars, Wild over 5.5 goals, which prop are you taking? Make your Moose Track.
I would probably tell you, Fensty, I would take Bruins, Panthers over 6. And the reason why is I think Minnesota's goaltending will be a little bit better tonight. Ottinger's been great for Dallas. And Carolina and the Islanders are just going to be a naturally kind of low-scoring, tight defensive battle. It's just the way that series is, very, very low-scoring. I tell you, I think Boston breaks out tonight against Florida. I'd go over 6 goals. And I don't think Olmark's been as sharp as he has been during the regular season. So I'd go over 6 goals, Florida and Boston.
Yeah, we'll have to see what happens there. But I'm keeping this, by the way, because we're keeping track of your Moose Tracks here. So you and Keith on Monday want to go over your results.
I will. Yeah, absolutely. Well, we got to tweet this out as well. But what do you like? Do you like anything of that? We get to the NBA.
I keep going back to the Hurricanes Islanders, being that both of these teams are more on the defensive end, thinking that this is the first playoff game in UBS, if I'm correct, right? Or am I wrong?
It is, yeah, I believe it.
I think that
I think
it is. I think it is. So I think that it's going to be rocking. I think that the Islanders are going to be a little bit more motivated. Ultimately, I don't think that they're going to win this series. They could make it competitive. I mean, the game went to overtime. I keep looking at that Hurricanes-Islanders goal total, thinking if the Islanders can score 2 here, then I think Hurricanes are capable of putting up 4, even though both of these teams are more on the defensive side. But naturally, after what we saw from Florida, I feel safer with Bruins-Panthers because of what you just said. So I'm actually going to switch my original decision. So the Fancy track of the Moose track, falling in line with you with Bruins-Panthers, going over 6 here.
Okay, so you like that. What's number 2?
Number 2, we go to the NBA here. Point prop for tonight's action. Would you rather take for your Moose tracks here? Make your track. Malcolm Brogdon, they're now reigning, defending 6th man of the year, over 12.5 points. Julius Randle, over 23.5 points. And then, as we talked about, Anthony Edwards, over 25.5 points. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit. I'm going to be like the prosecutor here. I'm going to give you some arguments here for these. For Malcolm Brogdon, with what you saw, the involvement for him, you have to think that Boston's going to want to get him more involved. And if you're thinking that Boston's going to be able to handle Atlanta again, you're going to see more of Malcolm Brogdon shooting the ball. I feel like because of what we've seen from Derek White early on in game 1, that limited him. But then you saw him get a few more shots here in game 2, and I'm feeling like he's going to go over this 12.5 points that we're seeing the line. That's why I picked these props, because I think that the overs are all capable here, and that's why you're making the decision. Julius Randle's been dealing with this ankle injury, and I think that if the Knicks are going to be able to win game 3, you're asking for a difference maker. You brought up Quentin Grimes. Well, he's going to be mainly productive from the arc. RJ Barrett, we already said that he can't be relied on. Quickly's going to have to rely on the best defensive team in the league, leaving him open lanes. The one difference maker that I think has enough skill to not lose the ball and slash down the lanes is Julius Randle. So over 23.5 points is what we're seeing that at right now, which, look, despite the good defense, he's perfectly capable of taking over the game. And we've seen a high volume of shots that he's taken throughout the series. Anthony Edwards, it all comes down to him, Moose. It all comes down. I mean, we saw this guy score over 40 points here, and Minnesota was able to make it a game. That is what Anthony Edwards is going to have to do again if Minnesota is going to have a prayer of not getting swept. So for me, I'm seeing the over 25.5. I'm thinking that he's taken 23 to 25 shots in this game, and the Wolves would be stupid to not feed him that much. So Moose, your Moose tracks based off these arguments: Malcolm Brogdon over 12.5 points, Julius Randle over 23.5 points, or Anthony Edwards over 25.5.
Fancy, I'm going with your guy Brogdon, 12.5.
Okay.
Everything you so brilliant, eloquently laid it out. I think Brogdon goes over 12.5 points. I think for every reason that you just mentioned. Number 1, he just won 6th man of the year. Number 2, the Atlanta Hawks don't play much defense. Number 3 is I do think the Celtics are going to win tonight and take a commanding 3-0 lead. I think Brogdon's going to be readily involved as well. So I'm going to take Malcolm Brogdon over 12.5 points.
Now, if I saw more of Atlanta, if I saw something else from Atlanta that I thought they can compete in this game, then I maybe shy away from it, thinking that the starters will be favored a little bit more, although Malcolm Brogdon gets a lot of minutes. But if I'm thinking that Boston's going to be up 8 to 12 points throughout this game, you're going to be seeing more of Brogdon, because you want to start being in preservation mode, because the Celtics have not forgotten that they have gone into playoff series before and playoff runs with injured players, i.e. Robert Williams. So they want to keep everybody as healthy as possible, and that's where you're going to see more of Brogdon leading the second unit. So I'm with you on that. We're both on the same Moose tracks for that one, Moose. We got time for another one here.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, I want to actually go to the weekend here, because I was thinking about this. I'm seeing a lot of games toggle between 5 and 5.5 point spreads. There are 4 of them on Saturday. So you've got the Sixers currently favored by 5, but I will say this, a little disclaimer. We don't know who exactly is going to be out on the court for the Philadelphia 76ers. You and I were talking a little bit earlier, and you could go back and check out the beginning of the show here on Moose and Keith when we were both talking about whether or not Harden and Embiid, both going to be suspended. So that's a little bit of a risk right now. The Suns are favored by 5 and 5.5. I see it toggling there against the Clippers. We do not know the status of Kawhi Leonard at this point. The Bucks favored by just 5 points against the Heat, but we also don't know here when it comes to Giannis and how healthy he is going in. And then the Grizzlies and Lakers also have their injury issue with Ja Morant. Now the Lakers are favored by 5, and I think they probably played down to Memphis, although Memphis has proven that they can be very dangerous without Ja Morant. We don't know his status there. So there's a little bit of a red flag disclaimer in every one of these games that happens to be a 5 or 5.5 point spread. Moose, of your Moose tracks, which of these teams do you think will cover, picking one of these matchups?
I think LeBron and the Lakers respond. I'd lay the 5 with LeBron. You ran through some of the issues where you're looking, Ja's obviously the health. The Heat were terrible. I mean, I think the argument to me would be either Lakers or Bucks, because I think Milwaukee is going to win Game 3. Tyler Hero, a huge loss for Miami. We saw the Bucks respond without Giannis in Game 2. Have no idea about Kawhi in Game 4. Therefore, if he plays, I think the Clippers can win Game 4, and we don't know what's going to be the availability of both Harden and Joel Embiid for the Philadelphia 76ers. I think the Lakers, I think LeBron respond in Game 3 after what was, I would say, a not-so-great effort in Game 2.
And the sports books, by the way, Moose, based off what Dylan Brooks is saying, he doesn't respect anyone until they drop 40 on him. If I'm all these sports books, I'm putting the LeBron point line at 38.5 and trying to get people, hey, take the over, feed into the narrative right there, because I think a lot of us, because we've seen it so many times, especially with a guy like Michael Jordan, and most notably, you saw The Last Dance, right?
Yes, it was great.
Amazing series. One
Jordan
that
on
stood
the
out.
iPad laughing.
Yeah, it's what you're sitting out there and you're seeing BJ Armstrong, of all people, when they were facing the Hornets in like the 98 first round. You're seeing him talk trash to everybody on the court. Michael Jordan didn't forget about that. So with this whole Dylan Brooks LeBron thing, I mean, a lot of people are thinking that LeBron's going for 40 plus.
I think he could.
Like that. I think he could. Might not be that many points, but still, you have to expect a giant.
I think the Lakers are going to respond. Yeah, I mean, I do. I mean, I'd be surprised if they didn't. They're home against Memphis. Therefore, I agree with you. All right, we got time for one more, Fency. What do we got?
All right, a strikeout prop. This one's going to be the toughest for me, Moose. I want to see if the Moose tracks will work in this case here.
I'm terrible at
strikeout. There you go. Nick Pivetta.
Just downplaying expectations.
Hey, this is what we do, right? This is what we talk about. Nick Pivetta over 5.5 strikeouts here versus the Milwaukee Brewers. You've got Shohei Ohtani over 7.5, a little bit of a big number, but over 7.5 Ks against the Royals, who strike out a lot. And then how about this? Mitch Keller raised the Jolly Roger right there. Over 5.5 versus the Reds, who tend to strike out a decent amount as well. Where are you going? Where are the Moose tracks line?
I'm going to play Shohei. What do you think? I mean, are you good with strikeout props for pitchers?
I'm decent. I'm Mr. 4.5. Like when I saw, like the other day, when I see someone like Logan Webb or Marcus Stroman, for instance, with a 4.5, more often than not, I'm going to take it for some reason.
I'm going to say, I'm sorry, Fency, and interrupt you. I'm going to say Ohtani because his last start was Boston Marathon Day, and his start was cut short because of the rain delays.
Right.
Correct? That was his last, yes.
Yeah, pretty sure about that. And then also I'll say this, a little bit of a defense for Mitch Keller, because again, the Reds do tend to strike out a lot. Keller's strikeout totals this year so far in his 4 starts, 8, 7, 7, and then his last one, 3, which probably against the Cardinals, which probably explains why we're seeing it at 5.5. So I'm with you with Ohtani, but man, I might have to put like a little cheapy bet on the over for Mitch Keller as well. And the Pirates are playing very well to start the year.
He's Justin Fensterman. I'm Mark Malusis. I think we've got some news in the National Football League we're going to get to coming your way after the break. And also Dave Sharapan. We're going to head out to Vegas and chat with Sharapan. We'll do that next. It's Moose and Keith with you on a Friday right here, Better Sports Network.
Moose and Keith. Weekdays at 10 a.m. Eastern on Better Sports Network.
Calvin Ridley yesterday. He applied for reinstatement from the National Football League.
Ridley, Kirk, Zay Jones, Travis Etienne, Trevor Lawrence. That is crazy potent on offense.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. I mean, Ridley's great.
I think Trevor Lawrence is a guy I want in fantasy this year.
I think you're probably right. I think they're just going to get better and better. First off, Peterson's a wonderful offensive mind, a great head coach, and we've seen that and saw that this year as Jacksonville made it to the postseason. And Trevor Lawrence, anybody that questioned whether or not he could play in the National Football League or just how good he was going to be in the NFL, those questions were answered this past season as in the second half of the year. Statistically speaking, he was a top 3 quarterback in the NFL. That's how good Trevor Lawrence is. You throw Calvin Ridley into the mix, he's going to be great. Yeah, I think Lawrence is a guy you want. I think Ridley's a guy you want. Clearly, Travis Etienne is going to be one of those early, first-round selections as well, being the dual-threat running back that he is, not only running, but also catching the ball out of the backfield, Keith, and the ability to take something small and take it to the house. Take a 5-yard dump pass, make a guy miss in the open field, and he's gone. I mean, you saw that with Travis Etienne this past season for Jacksonville. Yeah, sky's the limit. I mean, I think you're going to go from a team in the year span where you wanted no part of the Jacksonville Jaguars when you're looking at fantasy football to where you want as many Jaguars as you possibly can because they're going to be really, really productive. And let's see if they get their tight end back as well. Who had
Evan Ingram was great.
And Evan Ingram, who was great this past season.
Yeah. I mean, if they keep that whole core together, their offense is going to be one of the best in football. Like, I legitimately think that they could be one of the best offenses in football.
Zay Jones, Evan Ingram, Christian Kirk, then
and Ridley,
Travis Etienne, Trevor Lawrence, a good offensive line, and you've got Doug Peterson being creative, calling
right.
And you look at that division. The Colts are a mess.
Yep.
Titans
look like they're on the downslide.
Titans are on the downslide, right? That window is clearly closed. And then you got the Houston Texans.
Years away from relevancy.
Yeah.
I mean, Jacksonville could win 11 games next year.
Moose and Keith. Weekdays at 10 a.m. Eastern on Better Sports Network.
Now it's time for Floyd Mayweather's uncle, Dave Sharapan.
Sharapan, good morning, brother. How are you?
Good morning, guys. Festy, good to see you.
Good to see you too, Dave.
Good. It's all the buzz here is that the A's are coming here. We're going to have a Major League Baseball team here in a couple years. It's big news.
And that is big news. We'll get to that momentarily. I don't know if you caught it because when Fency and I, right before we went to our last break, news came out, National Football League. Rappaport just tweeted out, NFL issued a statement.
Mm-hmm.
3 players and 2 other 3 players have been suspended indefinitely, and 2 other players 6 games for gambling policy violations.
Yeah.
Cephas, CJ Moore, the Detroit Lions, Shaka Toney of the Washington Commanders are suspended for the entirety of the 23 season for betting on NFL games this past year. These players may petition for reinstatement at the conclusion of the 23 season. Now, 2 other players, Stanley Berryhill and Jamison Williams of the Lions, are suspended for the first 6 regular season games. So 3 players suspended for the entirety of the year, 2 others for 6 games for violating the NFL's gambling policy. Now, we saw Calvin Ridley get suspended for an entire season for the Atlanta Falcons. He's now being reinstated. He's a Jacksonville Jaguar. So, I mean, Fensty, Dave, whoever, the initial reaction, this is going to be a continued issue in the National Football League.
Go ahead. You can go first, Fensty.
Well, my biggest point of confusion, first of all, how could players be so stupid after seeing what happened to Calvin Ridley here? They didn't learn their lesson enough. These are their jobs, their livelihoods here. But why the different suspensions, though, if all of them violated these gambling issues? And I'm trying to find very quickly what the difference is in the violations, but shouldn't Jamison Williams be suspended for the entire season too?
I have no idea what they were doing. I just got a text that they were doing it from inside of practice facilities and all this other stuff. They're going to track them. They were doing it from their phones. What did the league think was going to happen? What in the world you're going to suspend the players? The owners bought the teams on gambling. I mean,
Yeah,
like
doubt.
what did they think was going to happen? And they're going to
Daniel
make
Snyder
examples
bought
of
the
players.
Washington, then the Redskins, now the Commanders, right, for $750 million. He just got into an agreement with Josh Harris's group for $6.05 billion. Do you think the popularity of the National Football League, part of the reason is not built on gambling?
Well,
and then you get in bed with all these gambling entities to where you can go into, it's going to become more and more popular to where there's going to be areas where in the stadium you can go in and make a bet.
They're putting sports books in the stadium. I mean, they're putting sports books in the stadiums, in baseball stadiums where there was a huge gambling scandal 100 years ago, blah, 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 blah. Art Rooney bought the Steelers after winning a horse bet. The Maras bought the Giants. Apparently they were bookmakers. I mean, like, the whole thing is tied to gambling. All of it is tied to gambling. And these aren't slap on the wrist for the players, but what did you think was going to happen? Like, we've seen this for decades here in Vegas. I was offshore years ago, decades ago. Same stuff. It's the same story. But now we're going to hear about it. There's going to be suspensions. It's going to look like, we're policing ourselves. We'll report. And if you do it, you'll get in trouble. You will. But every commercial will take all the money. We'll take the official betting partners of anybody. We'll sponsor shows like this. Sure. It's okay. Do the same game parlays. It's fine. It's hypocritical in the least hypocritical.
Well, and to answer, and I don't know this answer because the news just came down like literally 10 minutes ago. But I would say that for the 3 that were suspended indefinitely, if I just had to venture a guess, that was repetitive behavior. And then maybe the guys that got suspended 6 games, maybe they did it on 1 or 2 occasions.
The guys that got suspended longer probably won their bets. The guys that got suspended less probably lost.
You guys ever think about, like, how do they get caught exactly? Like, are these sports books, are their books in agreement with the league? Somebody somehow watching to see what usernames cross? I just always wondered, even with Calvin Ridley, how exactly do you get caught red-handed with these violations?
Oh, yeah. The books.
And how about players' Lions?
It was hard enough for the books to just take the bets and count the money and balance their books. That was a hard enough job. But as it became more and more and then passed, a lot of the government agencies that like to know these things came to the books and said, now you have to KYC, know your customer, and put in different checklists, points that you have to go through to even open an account to place a bet. And then, you guys know everything we're doing is being tracked on our phones.
Right.
No doubt. I mean, listen, I mean, just knowing people that work for the National Football League, once you start working for the NFL, like, you are prohibited from stepping foot into a casino or any sports book. You just can't do it.
Ironically, that is the case.
Yeah, I mean, but you look at it. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of holes to the argument, and you kind of raise the eyebrow. There's no doubt. The Lions have released. They just released 2 of the players, not Williams or Berryhill. They released Cephas, who, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly,
Cephas,
yeah, Cephas and Moore have been released by the Detroit Lions. So those 2 players have been released. They're both suspended for the entirety of the 23 season. Berryhill and Jamison Williams, I believe, have been they're suspended 6 games. They're still, as of right now, and you would imagine Jamison Williams, being a former first-round draft choice, isn't going anywhere in Detroit, but still, he was a guy that a lot of people were expecting big things year 2. Well, away from that, Dave, the big announcement, I was surprised it came down in Fensley. I don't know if you, like, it was released at like 9 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night Eastern time, that the A's have basically, they're moving to Vegas. Like, it was so strange. Like, I woke up the morning at like 6 a.m. with my kids, and it got released like at like 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock at night that they're leaving Oakland, not immediately because the stadium's not built yet, but they're going to build $1 billion stadium out in Vegas. Not surprising. This has been rumored for years, but How about the fact that you're gonna have Major League Baseball, Dave, in Las Vegas?
It's incredible what I mean, this is year number 20 for me living here. And to go from, the Las Vegas Wranglers, East Coast Hockey League team, to the Las Vegas 51s, AAA team, to we'll never have a sports franchise here. You can never have sports there because of, gambling and whatever other reason they came up with. It's wild. I mean, it is, the Knights have taken over the city. We're starting a playoff run. That's one thing. Then the Raiders came from Oakland. They built this gigantic, beautiful stadium right across the street from the Strip. Traffic is one thing. Everything else is another. And now they're talking about a baseball team and building another stadium. The big hubbub is where's the money coming from and all that other stuff. It's above my pay grade. But if you'd have told me 20 years ago when we moved here that I'd be able to go to a Major League Baseball game here, not a spring training game that they throw into the AAA ballpark, but a real live Major League Baseball game, I wouldn't have believed you. I definitely would not have believed you.
Makes me wonder, Dave, whether or not the NBA is next to go into Vegas too, because there has been a lot of talk that if they were to try to give a city a franchise, they want to bring it back to Seattle, because Seattle, the Supersonics, were completely stolen away from the city, from that, I don't want to say a bad word, from Clay Bennett, who had owned the Oklahoma City Thunder. It's like, oh, we're not moving the team. The next night, works with the city to move a team. They work out a deal. It makes me wonder, because of what we're seeing and the success and popularity, if Vegas would be prioritized for the NBA. It was all about making the money over bringing the Seattle fans their team back.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, do we need expansion? I mean, are we watching the games? Like, I don't know if we need more teams. I'd like better teams.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Right? I don't know if we need more teams.
I don't think we do either. I think that one of these teams would probably, I mean, I don't know who it would be at this point in the NBA. I'd like to think maybe Detroit, but then, you read about how Detroit, like, this is all they have. They rally around their team when they're good, but trying to think of teams like them, or even maybe the Charlotte Hornets, who have been moved before. And it makes me wonder if the NBA will try to take one of those teams without expansion, because I don't think they need expansion, and move one of those teams to Vegas over the next 10 years.
When you listen to the commissioners, a lot of them are talking about expansion. And I don't know. This is growing up as the son of the family business that was, didn't say that my dad said, expansion, getting more isn't always better. If you do what you do well and you keep it a certain way, you'll sell stuff, you'll have a good product. So I don't want to see more watered down teams. I don't want to see more 10-point spreads. I don't want to see more, no competition games. I'd rather see a better product, more competitive, and I don't know, more people at the games. If Vegas gets a team, it will be a monster. This is a basketball town first and foremost. The NBA will thrive in Las Vegas.
I think eventually you probably will. I mean, the fact at some point in time, you've got a hockey team, you're going to get a baseball team. Oakland's on its way, the A's, that is, and you've already got a football team. So at some point in time, an NBA team is gonna be in Las Vegas. Something that, let's be honest, 30 years ago, you'd never think. I mean, you had the running Rebels, and that's what made Jerry Tarkanian king, is because he ran that like a pro team, but all you had was UNLV, and you didn't have anything else. And everyone used to tell me, they'll never put a sports franchise in Vegas. They'll never put a sports franchise in Vegas. And here you have two already there. One's on its way, and you'll probably end up with an NBA team at some point.
Yeah, it's coming. Moose, how was the playoff game with the boys? Because I saw the picture. And awesome. I saw Fensty. I saw your tweet early this morning about going to playoff games. My dad and my three brothers, or my two brothers and I, four of us, used to go to games together. And I got goosebumps when I saw the picture of the kids, knowing that you're going with the boys to the playoffs, going, you you might take it for granted a little bit, and you're thinking about the drive there to park into this and to that. And the kids are going to have a memory forever.
Well, that's it. So yeah, it was the first playoff game they've ever been to.
Right.
Donna came with us as well, so it wasn't just the boys. So Donna came with us as well, and
so a dime over a dime in the door.
Oh yeah.
Oh boy.
But there's yeah, right. It's not
and over 2 dimes when you include parking.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It doesn't right. You throw in parking, you throw in the concessions.
Yeah,
it's not a cheap night, but it was a case of I was off at picks. They played well in game 1. I reached out to the Devils and I said, "Do you guys have any tickets available, like for me to buy and purchase?" Right. And they're like, "Yeah, well, we've got something." The guy Pete that runs PR for the Devils got back to me and gave him my credit card info and everything like that. Yep. They sent me the tickets and we went, surprised the boys. I was telling Fensty, like they woke up yesterday morning, had their Ranger jerseys out, surprised them. They were all excited. And then right after school started, it took us like 2 hours to get there because we had to go through down to Newark and you're in side streets, the parking, dealing with rush hour. But I mentioned to Fensty to watch that game through their eyes and see their excitement was just awesome. Like that. And you hit it on the head. Like Fensty provided great memories of games that he's been through. Like that's why we're sports fans and being able to kind of, the first Ranger Road playoff game I ever went to was last night. I've been to most of the games at the Garden that I've gone to, or all the games at the Garden that I've gone to. And to be there last night and to be there with the 3 boys and my wife was unbelievable. It was great.
What was yours, Dave? What was your most memorable playoff game that you've ever been to? You were saying that you went to games with your dad and your brothers here, but what one game was the most memorable for you?
So I was very lucky to see all of the Penguins mid-'80s, the year before Lemieux, all the way through like 96 before I left for Curacao. We had season tickets. So I saw so many hockey games, and I saw the run from being the worst team in the league to winning a Stanley Cup. I never saw the cup awarded in person, but every Mario Lemieux highlight, I was there. I was driving home from Penn State 3 hours on the day of the game. I'd go to class in the morning, drive home, have dinner at my house, go to the Penguin game, get back in a car and drive 3 hours back. Those were all the playoff games, all of them. The 1940 chant against the Rangers in the first run was amazing in the building. But my most memorable sporting event I think I've ever been to was Game 7, Diamondbacks, Yankees in Arizona. Rivera gives up the hit to Luis Gonzalez. The Diamondbacks beat the Yankees. It was after 9/11 was one of the most emotional things, that whole series. I was there and I went by myself because nobody would go with me. So I went down and hustled a ticket outside, hustled another ticket, traded 2 for 1 to get lower, sat in there, took it all in.
That's awesome.
There were no camera phones then.
No.
So I actually
enjoyed the moment.
Right.
Not only did I enjoy the moment, I have a ticket stub from it. I have a guy took my picture that I sat next to, and I exchanged addresses, and he sent me the picture, the actual picture of me at the World Series game at Game 7. So I only have one picture. It was taken by a stranger, but the memory is forever.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Dave, I hear you. I mean, I was showing these before. These are both of the ticket stubs I have from the Mets World Series game. I went to World Series Game 3 against the Yankees in the Subway Series that the Mets won. Benny Agbayani with a late 8th inning hit to the wall. And I just remember while they were playing Who Let the Dogs Out by the Baja Men.
Right.
That was the song with all the rage back then.
Yep.
I just remember the board flashing Hawaiian Punch the entire time after. And then in 2015, actually, coincidentally, Game 3 as well against the Royals, where the Mets, I mean, they were facing Yordano Ventura, rest in peace, and they were crushing the Royals all game, and it was like a 9-3 game, and it was cold as hell, guys, and I just remember when Yoenis Cespedes' like custom theme song would play, Everybody was just so happy that the Mets were up big. They were down 0-2 in the series. We were all just sitting there in the 30-degree weather dancing, going, Cespedes.
Right. It's you remember so many things. I mean, I was at the 1979 World Series as a 9-year-old. I remember just being cold. The Pirates lost to the Orioles. That was the last time they were in the World Series. I remember being cold and getting a program and a baseball. Like, I don't remember anything about the game. You remember certain things. It's funny, Moose. I can't wait to hear in 20 years what the boys remember from last night, because it's going to be way different than your remembering, 2 dimes, 2-hour drive, the parking. I'm glad Donna went, though, too. So then you get the experience, because you and her can share memories of that game. And
yeah, she loves.
You like being on the road with the team, because being home is one thing. Being on the road and winning gives you a little extra juice, no?
Oh, it was great.
It's
like it was the best. Like when you're walking in and first off, my kids were scared. Like, not because they see stuff on YouTube of fans when you go into a road spot and not being treated well, and they're like, are the Devil fans going to be nice to us? I'm like, guys, you're 10-8-6. Like nothing's going to happen. Like, you're going to be okay. Nothing's going to bother you. But it was a great atmosphere here in the "Let's Go Rangers" chants outside as we're waiting in line to get into the building, and then the Devils fans chanting back and this and that. Like, it was just an unbelievable atmosphere, because you haven't seen this Rangers Devils in 11 years. Like, I think the last time they met up, or maybe 10 years, 2012, 2013, Devils beat them in the Eastern Conference Finals before they lost to the Kings in the Stanley Cup Finals.
I'll never forget the Mateau.
Oh, yes.
That's the one for me. I mean, these are battles have been for years, and it's just different when you're playing within the division. You guys know, I mean, we're from that pocket. I mean, that Patrick Division wars back in the day were wars. I mean, and you knew the season was over. So the sense of urgency in the building's the best. And being
now we got home
road.
at like 12:30 this morning.
Did they go to school today?
Yes,
I was wondering that too.
Attaboy, Moose. Donna's a slave driver. Get up, boys. We took you to the playoff game. Get up and go to school.
I mean, they were probably more excited to go to school today than a lot of days, because they're coming off of a playoff win that they're at, and you can only imagine that they're getting ready to tell all their friends.
Oh, yeah, they couldn't wait. And I was nervous yesterday that the Devils are going to win the game. Like, and so when they fell behind 1-0,
nervous.
I was nervous. I wanted them to be in a Ranger win. I was nervous.
I know.
Moose, you had enough power plays early in that game to take away those nerves, man. They didn't even defend at all. The Rangers were wide open. They're pretty much in the crease on them.
Unbelievable.
Worried about the Devils actually winning a game in this series.
I know. This might be a sweep.
This one might be the sweep. I don't think there's any other sweeps, but this one might be it.
We have about a minute here, Dave. Well, exactly a minute. Quickly, minute. Anything tonight, tomorrow that you love, NBA, NHL?
I mean, the Islanders are going to win a game. I don't know if it's tonight or
I
game
think it's
4.
tonight.
I think it's tonight, too. That's my lean. And, I mean, we got to get a little Pittsburgh Pirate love. I mean, the Pirates are playing as good as anybody right now.
It's amazing.
They got the sword in the dugout, and they're playing the Reds as short favorite. Keller, Ashcroft, under. Okay, that's the play today. But the Sixers are beating the Nets, too. Just take that one. It's done. Like, the Nets, they're not going to win a game. So there's a sweep in the NBA.
Dave, congrats on getting the A's in Vegas, all right? Fensty, what a blast. 2 hours flew by, brother.
I couldn't believe it, man. It's like I looked at the clock. I'm like, wow, the show's already 75% over, Moose. But when you're having fun, that's how these are supposed to go, man.
That's exactly right. We're out. See you guys Monday at 10. Have a great weekend, everybody.